Now, Washington has set up an agency dedicated to renewed efforts aimed at contributing to the development of the African continent. Called the BUILD Act, the U.S. Senate approved the act with a majority vote of 93-6. Now, this has been described by analysts as the U.S. response to China's growing influence in Africa.
Exactly, Jerry. Many observers interpret this agency as a desire to compete with China for the continent. According to the Financial Times, 16 U.S. senators wrote in August to the Secretary of the Treasury, Steven Mnuchin, expressing outrage that the International Monetary Fund, IMF, was bailing out countries in difficulty because of Chinese funding. The letter expressed concern that Chinese loans to Djibouti would allow Beijing to take control of the country's container port. I recall that at the last China-Africa Cooperation Forum held in Beijing in early September, the Chinese president announced 60 billion for Africa's development, including 15 billion in grants and interest-free loans.
60 milliards de dollars pour le développement de l'Afrique, dont 15 milliards sous forme de dons et de prêts sans intérêt.
And with us now is Dante Alighieri Disparte. Dante is the founder and CEO of the Risk Cooperative based in Washington, D.C., USA. Thank you for joining us, Dante. While the Trump administration called for a cut in development aid budget, what do you think inspired Washington's new BUILD Act, which will see the creation of the International Development Finance Corporation, IDFC?
In my opinion, this is something to celebrate because it's the merger of all organizations and government agencies we have in Washington and the United States to promote investment in Africa. To date, most of these mechanisms are in debt or insurance, but this new organization will allow the investment of risk capital in African projects. So I think it's good for the United States and it's good for developing countries as well.
Ça permettra l'investissement de capitaux de risque dans les projets africains. Donc, je crois que ça sera bon pour les États-Unis et bon pour le pays en voie de développement.
The funds available to the IDFC are perceived by some Republican senators as a tool of economic diplomacy that is designed to counterbalance that's Beijing's influence on Africa, or in Africa rather. How valid is this? And if indeed this is the case, how good or bad is it for Africa being an economic battleground between the US and China?
Well, it depends. Every time there's an economic or trade battle between major countries, the major international powers, there's always a risk of collateral damage. And until now, the relationship between the African continent and the United States or other countries has always been a relationship with a lot of imbalance. Most of the value added goes elsewhere, and Africans stay with the money or investments that are not well redistributed in their countries. So I hope that this new American organization will allow investments that will help the African people, that will also allow African countries to benefit from the added value on all resources and investments in the continent.
Les pays africains de participer dans les valeurs ajoutées, dans tous leurs ressources et dans tous les investissements dans le continent.
So concretely, do you think the IDFC could be a more healthy American alternative to the Chinese debt diplomacy?
In Washington today, people are fighting between Republicans and Democrats for the creation of this new organization. For the first time, we saw support from all political actors. It is something that has brought a census between American politicians, and in my opinion, I think it will bring something good for Africa and for African countries, an expansion of investor activities on the continent, and also participation of long-term investments. This will develop the African market and at the same time support the development of African people.